Tasha wiped the counter one last time, her tired arms aching from a long evening at the small, crowded restaurant. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, and outside, the city lights flickered against the wet pavement. She had worked here for years, serving tables with a polite smile, always unnoticed by the people who walked in and out. But tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air, a strange energy she could feel in her bones. The door swung open suddenly, and in stepped a man whose presence filled the room instantly. He was tall, sharply dressed, and carried an air of arrogance that demanded attention. His friends followed, laughing loudly, their voices cutting to the soft music playing in the background. Tasha watched silently as he scanned the room, his eyes landing on her. The man smirked. Well, look who we have here, he said, his tone dripping with mockery. A little waitress, thinking she's something special. His friends laughed, echoing his scorn. Tasha felt a flicker of anger, but she did not respond. She had heard mockery before. She had faced people like him every day. But something about tonight made her pulse quicken. There was a challenge hidden in his tone, a cruel game he wanted to play, and somehow she knew she could win. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I'll give you $100,000, he said, "if you can serve me in Chinese." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. The restaurant seemed to go quiet for a moment, the chatter fading into the background. She looked at him, taking in the arrogance on his face, the way he thought he could humiliate her for sport. The crowd watched with curiosity. Some whispered to each other, wondering what the young waitress would do. Some laughed, thinking the challenge was impossible. After all, how many people in a small city restaurant could speak another language, let alone Chinese? Tasha's lips curved into a small, confident smile. Inside, she felt a calm she had learned to carry over the years. She had learned many languages, not for attention, not for praise, but because knowledge was power. And tonight, she would show the world just how powerful that knowledge could be. She straightened her back, took a deep breath, and walked toward the table. Her movements were steady, deliberate, each step measured. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, a smug grin playing on his lips. "This will be fun," he muttered to himself. Tasha stopped in front of him and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that belied the fire in her eyes. "Good evening," she said softly. Then, with a voice clear and precise, she added a phrase in perfect Mandarin. The millionaire froze. His smirk faltered. His friends looked at each other, confused, whispering under their breath. Tasha continued, pouring water and serving the first dish, speaking each sentence in flawless Chinese. The words flowed smoothly, naturally, and with authority. The tension in the room shifted. Whispers turned into gasps. The arrogant millionaire could not hide his surprise, his confidence cracking under the weight of her talent. The other customers leaned forward, eager to watch, sensing something extraordinary unfolding before their eyes. Tasha finished serving the first course and looked at him. Her eyes held a quiet challenge, a question that needed no words. "Do you still think you can mock me?" He swallowed hard, trying to regain his composure, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. The game had begun, and Tasha was ready. The scene ended with the millionaire laughing nervously, unsure of whether he was still in control, while Tasha's lips curled into a secretive smile. She knew this was only the beginning, and the real challenge was yet to come. Tasha stood quietly behind the table, her eyes fixed on the millionaire. The room was tense. Every person in the restaurant seemed frozen, waiting for the next move. The arrogant man cleared his throat, trying to regain control. That was just luck, he sneered, attempting to mask his surprise. Anyone could have learned a few words. Tasha smiled faintly, but it was not a smile of fear. It was the kind of smile that hinted she had far more to show than he could imagine. She took a step closer, her movements calm, deliberate, each motion carrying a quiet confidence. She had learned to stay composed under pressure, and tonight, every second counted. In her mind, she remembered the night she had spent studying languages while others laughed at her ambition. She remembered her parents, who had encouraged her read, speak, and learn everything she could. Chinese, French, Spanish, Japanese, 9 languages in total. Knowledge had been her secret weapon, and now was the moment to use it. She leaned slightly toward the table and greeted the millionaire again in Mandarin, this time adding a polite but precise question about his order. His friends froze, their mouths slightly open. He coughed, embarrassed. He had thought he could mock her, but she was clearly beyond his expectations. The millionaire tried again, switching to French, thinking she might stumble. "Can you speak French, little waitress?" he asked, smirking. Tasha's eyes sparkled. Without hesitation, she answered him in perfect French, her tone polite yet firm. She poured his wine while conversing effortlessly, and the millionaire's smirk faltered. His friends whispered among themselves, astonished, their amusement turning into awe. She continued serving his meal, switching seamlessly between languages, each one flowing naturally from her lips. Spanish, Japanese, Italian. Each phrase precise, confident, and commanding respect. The millionaire's laughter began to fade, replaced by unease. The room, once filled with casual diners, now watched in silent suspense, leaning closer, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. Tasha paused briefly, looking directly into his eyes. "Is there another language you want me to try?" she asked softly, almost teasing. The man's face reddened, and he glanced at his friends for support. None of them could speak. None of them could believe what they were witnessing. Tasha's calm demeanor, combined with her clear mastery of every language, made him look small, even powerful in his arrogance. The tension in the restaurant was almost unbearable. People were recording with their phones, whispering to each other, gasping occasionally. Tasha's performance had transformed a simple challenge into a spectacle. Every word she spoke was not just communication. It was a statement that skill, patience, and knowledge could overcome arrogance. Finally, Tasha served the last dish, a small dessert the millionaire had ordered. She bent slightly and handed it to him, saying the name in Mandarin again, perfectly enunciated. Silence hung in the air. The millionaire looked at the plate, then at her, then back at his friends. The arrogance in his eyes had been replaced with a flicker of fear. He had underestimated her completely. Tasha smiled, calm and confident. The audience could feel the shift. She was not just a waitress. She was a force to be reckoned with. And the man who thought he controlled the situation had no idea what was coming next. Her gaze lingered on him, her eyes silently saying, "This is only the beginning." The crowd held its breath, sensing that the next move would change everything, and that the millionaire's pride might not survive the night. The millionaire's face was a mask of disbelief. His friends leaned back in their chairs, whispering nervously to each other. Nobody had ever seen anything like this. A young black waitress, calm and composed, speaking flawlessly in multiple languages, while serving a table full of rich, mocking patrons. You speak too many languages," he stammered, trying to regain control. "That's impossible." Tasha didn't answer. She simply picked up his glass and refilled it, moving with grace and precision. Then, with a polite nod, she greeted him in Spanish this time, asking if the wine was to his liking. The millionaire's smirk wavered. "Okay, that's cute," he said, leaning back. "Let's see. French. Surely you can't." Tasha interrupted, speaking perfectly in French, and even added a small joke about the dessert he had just been served. His friends froze, and the smirk on his face began to crack. The restaurant fell silent, the other diners now fully captivated. Phones emerged, cameras filming the unexpected spectacle. "You how?" he muttered, his voice tight. "You're just a waitress. Nobody can speak 9 languages." Tasha smiled softly, but her eyes were sharp. "I've studied a lot," she said simply in English. "Knowledge is not about who you are. It's about what you choose to learn." The millionaire's friends glanced at each other uneasily. Whispers filled the air. Customers leaned in, some whispering, others quietly cheering her on. The man's arrogance was no longer funny. It was trembling under the weight of Tasha's skill. He tried again, this time raising the stakes. "Japanese! Speak Japanese! I want to hear it," he barked, trying to assert his dominance. Tasha didn't hesitate. With the same calm confidence, she switched effortlessly to Japanese, serving the next dish while pronouncing each word perfectly. A small smile played on her lips, almost teasing. The millionaire flinched. He realized that every insult, every challenge, only gave her a chance to prove him wrong. The tension in the restaurant grew. Every eye was on Tasha. Even the staff paused, watching in disbelief. She moved like a quiet storm, graceful but powerful, a force the arrogant man could not control. You're making a fool of me, he finally shouted, frustration breaking through his usual calm arrogance. Tasha paused, looking directly into his eyes. Her calmness was unshakable. No, she said gently. I'm showing the truth. Arrogance and mockery don't win over skill and knowledge. He clenched his jaw, his face reddened with anger and embarrassment. The audience sensed his panic. Every word he had spoken to mock her now seemed small, petty, meaningless. And the more he tried to control the situation, the more he revealed his own weakness. Tasha served the next plate in Italian, adding a polite explanation of the ingredients in perfect accent. She looked around the room briefly, noticing people recording, whispering, even smiling. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a performance, a lesson, a challenge the millionaire could not match. As she returned to his table one last time, she leaned slightly, her tone calm but piercing. "Any other language you want to speak?" she asked. The millionaire's friends exchanged nervous glances. He was trapped, his arrogance exposed in front of the entire restaurant. Every mocking word he had spoken was now echoing against his own embarrassment. Tasha's quiet confidence filled the room. The audience could feel it, the calm before a storm, the tension rising higher than ever. And in that moment, it became clear. This challenge was far from over, and the real test was just beginning. Tasha stepped back slightly, letting the tension in the restaurant settle for a moment. The millionaire's friend sat frozen, unsure whether to laugh, cheer, or run. The man himself was sweating, his confidence cracking with each language she flawlessly spoke. But tonight was not just about proving a point. For Tasha, it was personal. She glanced at the small purse hanging from her shoulder, remembering her family. Her mother had struggled to pay bills, working double shifts, while her younger siblings dreamed of better lives. This $100,000 was not just money. It could change everything. It could pay rent for months, buy medicine her father needed, and even fund her little brother's school tuition. The thought made her heart beat faster, but she did not falter. She had faced challenges before, but never one like this, in front of a crowd of strangers, with a man mocking her with every word. Her calm smile hid a storm inside, and her eyes glinted with determination. The millionaire, trying to recover his pride, leaned forward. "All right, that was good," he said, his voice tight. "French, Spanish, Japanese, not bad. But can you handle something real? Something I choose?" Tasha's smile widened just slightly. She nodded. "Of course," she said, her voice steady. He grinned wickedly. "Okay, then serve me in German, and don't make a mistake." Tasha tilted her head, her eyes sharp, with a gentle nod. She spoke in flawless German, describing the meal, asking if the wine was satisfactory, and even making a small joke about the chef's choice of spices. His smirk faltered. Every sentence she spoke exposed his arrogance, and the whispers from the crowd grew louder. Customers began leaning forward, some holding their phones up, capturing the moment. They watched as the millionaire's pride crumbled in real time. He tried to regain control, but Tasha was unstoppable, moving from language to language, serving each dish with precision, grace, and a subtle humor that left him speechless. The tension rose even higher when she added another layer: personal attention. Tasha remembered how many people had underestimated her in the past. Teachers, bosses, strangers. And now, she had the perfect moment to show how intelligence and patience could silence mockery. She leaned slightly, maintaining eye contact with him, and asked about his preferences in Arabic, describing the dessert's texture and taste with confidence. The millionaire's face went pale. He had expected a simple performance, maybe a joke or a few phrases. But this was mastery, delivered with a calm precision that made him feel small in front of everyone. His arrogance now teetered on the edge of panic. Tasha served the next plate, and the restaurant erupted in whispers and quiet cheers. People started nodding, impressed not just by her skill, but by her poise and courage. She was not just a waitress anymore. She was a force commanding respect intelligence, and dignity. Finally, she stood tall, hands folded lightly in front of her. "Any other language you would like me to speak?" she asked softly, her tone polite but firm. Her eyes locked on his. There was no fear there, only confidence. The millionaire clenched his jaw, feeling powerless for the first time in years. His mocking was gone, replaced by a growing unease. The room waited, every person leaning forward, wondering what she would do next. The stakes were higher than money now. Their attention, judgment, and admiration were all in play. Tasha's calm, confident gaze swept across the room. The silence was deafening, and everyone could feel it. The moment when arrogance meets skill, patience, and determination. She smiled faintly, a spark of mischief in her eyes. The real challenge had only begun, and the millionaire had no idea how far she was willing to go to win this game. The restaurant was silent, the air thick with tension. Every eye was on Tasha, the young black waitress who had already shattered every expectation the millionaire had. He sat rigid, trying to hide his growing frustration, while his friends whispered nervously. Tasha, however, stood calm and composed, her hands steady, her gaze unwavering. She had already spoken 9 languages, impressing the crowd and breaking the millionaire's arrogance. But deep inside, she knew the real test had not yet begun. The challenge was no longer about language. It was about control, confidence, and wit. The millionaire leaned back, attempting to regain his dominance. "Not bad," he said slowly, trying to sound casual. "But I think it's time for a real test, something unexpected." He smirked, thinking he was clever, that he could finally trip her up. Tasha's eyes glimmered with quiet amusement. She knew he had no idea what she was about to do. "I'm ready," she said simply, her voice calm and confident. He raised an eyebrow. "Then, serve me using sign language." A ripple of laughter spread among his friends. "Sign language?" one of them whispered, barely able to hold back a chuckle. "She can't do that." Tasha's lips curved into a faint smile. Without hesitation, she began to communicate using perfect sign language, her hands moving fluidly and confidently. Every gesture, every motion, conveyed meaning clearly and gracefully. She described the dishes, explained the ingredients, and even added polite humor, leaving the millionaire dumbfounded. The room gasped. Phones were lifted, cameras recording the unexpected spectacle. The crowd had witnessed her brilliance in spoken languages, but this was beyond their expectations. She had turned a simple restaurant table into a stage where skill, intelligence, and confidence shone brighter than money or arrogance. The millionaire tried to recover his composure. "Okay, that's impressive," he muttered, swallowing hard. "But you're just lucky." Tasha shook her head gently, signing a few more sentences. She moved with grace and precision, demonstrating control and mastery. "This is not luck," she signed. "This is skill. This is preparation. This is patience." The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. People whispered to one another, some nodding in admiration, others gasping in disbelief. The millionaire's arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by frustration and a creeping sense of fear. He realized that every attempt to mock her, every challenge it issued, had only made her stronger, more confident, and more commanding. Tasha stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. With a subtle movement, she handed him a small dessert plate, signing politely but clearly, explaining each detail, the flavor, texture, and ingredients. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for it. The crowd was silent, hanging on every gesture. The millionaire's friends could hardly believe their eyes. What had started as a joke, mocking a waitress, had turned into a lesson in humility and respect. Tasha had not only conquered his challenge, but she had elevated herself above him in every way. Finally, she finished, folding her hands calmly. She looked around the room, her gaze resting briefly on each customer who had been watching, and then returned to him. Her silent message was clear. "I am in control. You cannot mock me. Respect is earned, not bought." The millionaire swallowed hard, realizing he had been beaten, not by chance, but by talent, confidence, and intelligence. The audience, now fully aware of her skill, broke into quiet applause. Phones recorded every moment, whispers of admiration spreading like wildfire. Tasha stepped back, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. The turning point had arrived. She had not just passed the challenge. She had flipped the power in her favor. And the millionaire, for the first time, understood that his arrogance was meaningless against true talent. The restaurant had transformed into a battlefield of tension. The millionaire sat frozen, his confidence shattered, while his friends whispered nervously to one another. Every person in the room was fully captivated. Some recorded the scene, others leaned forward, unable to look away. And at the center of it all stood Tasha, calm, poised, unshakable. He tried to speak, his voice tight with frustration. This isn't fair. I was joking. I didn't expect you to. Tasha's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. Fairness has nothing to do with arrogance, she said softly, her tone polite but firm. Mocking others because you feel powerful doesn't make you strong. Respect does. The millionaire's jaw tightened. He looked around, realizing the room had turned against him. Customers whispered, some nodding in approval, others shaking their heads at his foolishness. His friends avoided eye contact, sensing that this was no longer a game. He had lost control completely. You think you're better than me? He spat, trying to regain dominance. Tasha stepped closer, her presence commanding the room. I don't think I'm better than anyone, she said quietly. I only show what I've worked for. Knowledge, skill, patience, these are earned. Arrogance is empty. The room seemed to hold its breath. The millionaire's face reddened as embarrassment and frustration battled within him. He had mocked her, humiliated her in front of others, and now she stood taller than him in every sense. Tasha moved with grace, continuing her demonstration of skill. She spoke in Arabic, then switched to Japanese, seamlessly integrating the language with gestures and polite humor. Every word, every movement, reminded the room and the millionaire that he had underestimated her. You're making me look ridiculous, he growled, voice low, hands trembling slightly. Tasha paused, looking him directly in the eyes. You've been showing who you are, she said softly, and now everyone sees it too. A few customers clapped quietly, then others followed. Whispers turned to murmurs of admiration. Phones were lifted, capturing every second. The millionaire's face contorted with frustration. For the first time, he realized that money and status could not command respect. Skill and confidence could. Finally, she leaned slightly, her gaze unwavering. The challenge was simple, she said. Respect the skill of others. You set the rules, but I've shown who really earns respect. Now it's your choice, acknowledge it or lose it completely. The room erupted in subtle applause. The millionaire's friends exchanged nervous glances. He clenched his jaw, realizing he had no escape. He had mocked her publicly, underestimated her talent, and now the audience was on her side. Every word he had spoken in arrogance now seemed hollow. Finally, with a strained voice, he spoke. Fine. You've proven yourself. The $100,000, take it. Tasha nodded calmly, accepting the challenge's reward with quiet dignity. She could feel the weight of victory, not just for the money, but for the lesson she had delivered. The room sensed it too. She had not only conquered the challenge, but had flipped the power dynamic completely. She looked around, acknowledging the audience with a small, respectful smile. The millionaire slumped in his chair, defeated, forced to accept a lesson he had never wanted to learn. Tasha's calm confidence, skill, and poise had done what arrogance never could, command respect through mastery and grace. As she stepped back, folded her hands lightly, she whispered under her breath, quietly but firmly, sometimes the strongest victories are the ones you win with your mind. The restaurant seemed to exhale collectively. The confrontation had ended, but the impact lingered in every whisper, every glance, every phone recording. Tasha had won, not just a challenge, but the respect of everyone who had witnessed it. The air in the restaurant was electric. Tasha stood near the exit, the $100,000 quietly tucked into her bag. The millionaire sat at the table, his face pale, his arrogance stripped away, while his friends exchanged awkward glances. Customers whispered, some clapping quietly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Every eye was on her. Tasha's heart still raced, not from fear, but from triumph. She had faced mockery, arrogance, and doubt, yet she had walked through it all with confidence, skill, and grace. This was more than a victory for money. It was a lesson about respect, talent, and the power of believing in yourself. She took a deep breath and walked toward the door, her movements calm and measured. Her eyes swept across the room, meeting those of the diners who had witnessed the unfolding spectacle. Some gave her nods of admiration. Others whispered words of praise, but all were captivated by her quiet strength. The millionaire, for the first time, looked small. His smirk had vanished, replaced by a mixture of shame and begrudging respect. He cleared his throat, but no words came. Tasha didn't need him to speak. She had already said everything through her actions. Her talent, patience, and confidence had spoken louder than his arrogance ever could. As she reached the exit, she turned slightly and addressed him, her voice calm but firm. Next time, choose respect over mockery. You'll get far more in life that way. The words lingered in the air. The millionaire swallowed hard, his pride wounded, while his friends nodded silently, realizing that they had underestimated the waitress, and perhaps underestimated life itself. Outside, the cool night air embraced Tasha. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, and for a moment, she allowed herself to smile freely. She had turned a simple act of service into a statement of power. People had seen her rise above mockery, confront arrogance, and claim what was rightfully hers, not just the money, but the respect she had earned. She thought of her family, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the dreams they had carried for her. Tonight's victory was theirs as much as it was hers. The $100,000 would help them, yes, but more importantly, it had shown that no challenge, no mocking voice, could ever diminish her talent, her confidence, or her value. Back inside, whispers grew louder. Phones buzzed with recordings, clips spreading on social media. People would talk about this night for weeks, amazed at how a young black waitress had not only met a ridiculous challenge, but had completely transformed it into a lesson of respect and intelligence. Tasha walked away from the restaurant, her step steady, her head held high. She didn't need applause or recognition. She had already achieved what mattered most. The challenge had ended, but its impact would resonate far beyond the walls of that restaurant. As she disappeared into the glow of the city lights, she glanced back one last time, her eyes catching the millionaire's gaze. A subtle, knowing smile crossed her lips. He had learned something he would never forget. Underestimating someone because of their position, appearance, or role is the fastest way to discover your own weakness. Tasha's story would live on, not just as a tale of skill or triumph, but as a powerful reminder that confidence, preparation, and dignity can conquer arrogance in ways money never can. And as she walked into the night, she carried with her not just a reward, but the satisfaction of a challenge met and a lesson delivered. The city lights reflected her smile. She was more than a waitress. She was a force. And tonight, the world had seen it.